Talking Star Wars presents Talking Avatar.
Hello, listeners. My name is Alex,
And I'm Connor.
and today we are talking Star Wars, continuing with the final episode of our first Avatar miniseries, exploring another franchise near and dear to our hearts. Continuing from our previous episode on the expanded universe materials in the universe of Avatar: The Last Airbender, going through the additional graphic novels we did not touch on last time.
Yeah, last time we talked about largely the number of graphic novel collections that take the story of Team Aang, that Team Avatar, and progresses them from the end of their television series through a few years just to see what their following adventures were like and how the build-up towards Republic City is already begun.
So, if you would like to hear our thoughts about The Promise, The Search, The Rift, Smoke and Shadow, North and South, and Imbalance, please see episode A11. If you listen to that one, or just want to hear about the Legend of Korra comics and some of the other standalone ones, feel free to stay here, and we're happy to talk all about it.
So some of these standalone Avatar graphic novels I haven't dipped into entirely. I read some of them way back when they were first released. But what's happening in these following novels since we've last seen our characters in Imbalance?
So, as we talked about last time, we had a series of 3 volumes each, sort of then being combined into a total volume, continuing with an ongoing narrative from The Promise all the way through Imbalance, sort of leaving our characters in a trajectory where you could see them moving forward. After that big series finished, sort of 2017, 2018 with Imbalance, since then we have mostly received, in the Aang continuity, these standalone graphic novels or comics, some of which have continued the ongoing story, but many of which are more retrospective and filling in other gaps. So there is a 5th one coming out later this year about Uncle Iroh and June, but the 4 that exist currently are Suki Alone, Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, Katara and the Pirates Silver, and Azula in the Spirit Temple.
Is the Uncle Iroh in June, is June the mount of that lizard creature that he was flirting with?
June is the actual bounty hunter, so...
Yeah. So, yeah, the one that he was flirting with.
Yeah, and then had some weird interactions with that would not have been considered kosher in today's day and age, and were still a little bit weird in the early 2000s. And I believe this comic may be an attempt to explain how, while Uncle Iroh is a good person, he's not a perfect person.
Please don't cancel him. He's such a otherwise benevolent father figure.
Yeah, but his weird actions still need to be challenged. So we'll see what that comic ends up being about, as far as that goes.
So I would consider, we've had our previous collections, which are really taking the story and advancing them. But with these standalone graphic novels, I would assume that they're, trying to delve into these individuals more. It's not so much a progression of how the team is moving or the world is moving, but it sheds some light on the characters themselves, I would imagine.
Yeah, you'll notice that these do not contain the deep amount of plot that the other graphic novels we talked about do. They are mostly set in a shorter period of time, focused on usually 1 or 2 characters, and have usually a single inciting incident, which works fine. And they're sort of, again, as standalone pieces, and they sort of fill in little gaps that were otherwise left behind by the narrative. Whether they are necessary is sort of up to you as the individual reader. I highly enjoyed all of them myself and find that they are a nice coda to some of the character interactions that we've seen. But if you're looking for big meaty bits of story like we've seen in the previous collections, you might be a little disappointed.
Sure. So the first one is taking a look at Suki, correct?
This is my favorite one, so we'll just lead off with this one. And as we'll see, these are not all set, linearly in time, sequentially. Some of them are going back to a previous point in time to fill in some gaps. So Suki Alone, which is deliberately calling back to the episodes of Zuko Alone and Korra Alone that were pretty spectacular in the original animated series.
Was there ever an Appa Alone, or was it Appa Tales?
It was Appa's Lost Days.
Gotcha. Oh, gut punch of an episode.
Yeah, so this one is all about Suki in the Fire Nation prison, the Boiling Rock, that she is transferred to, and her survival there, leading up to when Zuko and Sokka meet up with her in the prison after they're making the relatively ill-advised attempt to infiltrate it themselves with no prior plan.
So how is her character expanded on? So Suki's a fairly prominent side character. I kind of introduced as a one-off in the first season of Avatar, and then she grows more and more crucial to Team Avatar and Sokka himself.
Yeah,
So how has her character progressed in this graphic novel?
yeah, it's a good trajectory for Suki's character in that she starts as a standalone single episode character, and then by the end of the series is the probably least prominent but still honorary member of Team Avatar. She is there for the final confrontation. She is Sokka's partner. She saves Toph's life and Sokka's life, and is there since the Boiling Rock all throughout, which I appreciated. They did not make an excuse for Suki to suddenly leave things in the hands of the main characters. She has interactions with all of them and holds her own. And Suki is older than pretty much everyone else but Sokka. She is already the leader of the Kyoshi warriors as a young adult, and so when we see her, she is very has an insular worldview. She's very committed to the Kyoshi warriors. They're not part of the war. By the time we see her in season 2, she has convinced her people to join the war on behalf of the Earth Kingdom as a whole to fight against the Fire Nation, where she then fights against Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee, and loses. So this shows how she is captured by them and ends up in prison. And so this emphasizes the primary trait that Suki has that many of Team Avatar actually really don't, which is sort of leadership in adverse situations, especially when she is captured and has no hope of escape. So she instead begins to make relationships with other prisoners as much as she can. She knows that she wants to stage an escape, and so that's her long-term plan. But her short-term plan is just making things better for the prisoners there. Particularly, they're not fed enough to really keep their strength up. So she starts a secret garden in a little secret courtyard area that's accessible from one of the rooms she has access to in the prison. For good behavior, she is not yet locked in maximum security, and so for quite a while, she is able to grow these beans in this secret garden and shares them with other prisoners to help keep their strength up, with the short-term goal of keeping everyone alive, long-term goal of getting enough strength up to then maybe stage a breakout. She draws strength from the thought of Avatar Kyoshi, and we do see Avatar Kyoshi appear to her in a vision. Whether it is actually Avatar Kyoshi or simply Suki imagining it is left up to the viewer.
It's not entirely out of the question to have her actually appear, just with how spiritual this world is, and in times of great desperation, I can imagine that Kyoshi would make herself known to Suki.
And given Kiyoshi's characterization in her own novels, I would agree. So there's not. I don't want to just give a whole explanation of the plot. Mm-hmm. It's not a long story, so you could read the whole thing in just an afternoon or an hour. But Suki is betrayed by another prison member, is denigrated by the warden, and is left in a situation where she tried to help other people and failed, and so that is why she is sort of a little dejected when Sokka and Zuko first see her, but is immediately ready to snap into action when they are ready to go. So it shows how she has this inherent leadership ability, how she faces through adversity, because she's not a bender, she's not the Avatar, she does not have great resources and strength to call upon externally, but she has a great internal strength. And especially it shows, she's sort of in the women's wing of the prison, how she forms these bonds with other women in a negative and challenging situation to show leadership and hopefully break everyone out of a terrible situation.
So since this one takes place in between an arc, and we know that, Sokka and Zuko are going to come and help to rescue Suki, does the graphic novel itself have a satisfying enough conclusion to where we know that the story's not complete, but at least this arc in Suki's story is?
Yeah, because she's not going to break out of the prison. So the arc is instead about Suki's internal struggle with herself as a leader. She's separated from the Kyoshi warriors. They themselves are taken to different prisons, and she as the leader is imprisoned in the Boiling Rock so that she could not, incite people already loyal to her to rebellion. And because that's her immediate thought is, let's incite a rebellion. So, good on you, Fire Nation, understanding what to do. Maybe shouldn't have let Azula just in and have carte blanche, or your
Right.
prison may have actually remained impregnable.
Hmm. All right. So then, taking a look at our next graphic novel, uh, what comes next sequentially? Would this be our Katara and the Pirate Silver, or would this be Toph's Metalbending Academy?
This would be Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy.
And so I've voiced my opinion towards her metalbending students and my lack of enjoyment just because they're flatter characters. So when we talked about this graphic novel a bit before, you mentioned that they're not the primary characters, but this centers more around Toph.
Yeah, they still are characters. So the three main characters of this graphic novel are Toph, Suki, and Sokka. So it shows, just these three members of Team Avatar who are really the uh, not the core three from the original, the other three that have arrived later. Well, I guess Sokka was part of both, but so Sokka and then his girlfriend and one of his best friends. She invites them to the Metalbending Academy. This is sort of a sequel to the Rift, so set between the Rift and when Toph joins them in North and South. So we get some world building that gives us some context to the end of the Rift and sort of the joint business ventures that eventually lead to Republic City. And we see some direct interaction between Toph and Suki, which is always great to see. And
Especially since Toph has an enormous crush on Sokka.
that is correct. And we do, this is resolved. Toph, I think, gets over her crush on Sokka somewhat here. But Toph just mentions that she's not finding teaching as fulfilling. Her original three students have now begun to teach classes of their own and are better teachers than she is.
Unsurprisingly.
Teaching was not really her strong suit. Just metal
Yeah.
bending itself was her strong suit.
Toph is a coach more so than a teacher. She's more brusque, a bit more brutal. Her expectations aren't as, I don't know, lax.
Yep, and so that's where Toph is left, is just wondering what to do. And Suki, always there to help counsel other people, is like, here, let's go to this. You can join the Kyoshi Warriors. We're going to do a concert locally. And then the concert is actually being put on by the band Trustfully in Love, which is headlined by Chong, who is of Secret Tunnel song fame. Suki ends up being a big fan. Toph and Sokka, not so much. So they bond over. Sokka, of course, still finds Suki adorable. Toph is like, get me out of here, please.
Hmm.
But then, of course, uh, the plot interjects here. We find an illegal bending tournament happening. We see the first instance of lava bending that occurs, and Toph is sort of forced to find that she finds this whole back streets illegal fighting arena much more engaging than she does find teaching her students.
And that's really where she started in the first place when Team Avatar discovers her. She's in this underground fighting competition, winning her own personal riches.
Yeah, and then Toph ends up having to have this whole buddy cop moment with Chong. Chong being, of course, a non-bending musician, and Toph being a no-nonsense earthbender. So it's sort of this fun little caper with Toph, Chong, Suki, Sokka. Uh, we see another earthbending technique with lava bending showing up in this around the same time it showed up in um, The Legend of Korra. But as far as like moving forward the plot, this is mostly a character focus on Toph. How does she feel about her changing? She's older than she was. She is no longer just a 12-year-old runaway from home. She's normalized relations somewhat with her father. She has her own academy. She has friends that she sees, but not every day. So how does she go from there? And what are her feelings about how the world is going forward? So I personally liked this one as well, and I found Chong to be hilarious.
Hmm.
I'm not a Chong stan as far as that goes in the Secret Tunnel, but I found him as a foil for Toph to be quite enjoyable.
And it's interesting because, as with the element of Earth, Toph is more of a static character, where she is always gruff. She is always a little, I don't know, not easy with the uh, encouragement or positivity. So seeing how she kind of has to bristle against that in the role of teacher is an interesting one. Just because someone is skilled doesn't mean that they make for a good educator. So then, as far as Katara and the Pirate Silver goes, you said this was a kind of a retrospective look at Katara's life.
Yes, this was the third in a little trilogy about like the powerful women of Avatar. So we have one about Suki, one about Toph, and now one about Katara. Uh, Katara and the Pirate Silver is a standalone story. It basically feels like an episode of season one of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So Katara and the Pirate Silver is set sometime between recruiting Toph to Team Avatar and arriving at Ba Sing Se. And details Katara being separated from the group and falling in with a group of pirates who are trying to survive the Fire Nation occupation. She, in an attempt to, so she's left without Appa or her friends. She has to try to find passage down a river to meet up with everyone, thus falling in with the pirates, who are looking for a waterbender for a job. So Katara agrees to, okay, I'll be your waterbender, but you have to give me transportation. So that is how their business arrangement goes in. While Aang and Toph and Sokka are frantically looking for Katara.
And so, what growth do we have here? I can imagine that Team Avatar doesn't always appreciate what Katara brings to the table, just because she is usually in a point of contention where she needs to make sure the mission is on track and everyone is contributing. Uh, but without her, you know, all that organization leaves as well.
Yeah, so we have to see Katara by herself. So she doesn't have her brother, Aang, Toph. So she has to figure out who she is when she's not surrounded by people she has to take care of, and instead must take care of herself. At several points, she tells herself, okay, I have to be more like Toph, be more standing up for myself, and be more aggressive in this situation. She also realizes she's in danger. We see her growth from the waterbending school episode, where there she ended up by herself and was immediately captured and sort of became a damsel. Here she's like, all right, I must take active efforts to secure my own release and get back to my friends. And we see her bending ability having grown significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Paku even calls her a waterbending master in the start of season 2, and we see that in full display. The biggest thing is she's trying not to draw too much attention to herself because she needs to get back to Aang. But there's not really anyone in the comic who can match her. But she's trying not to be too flashy so that she's not attacked by the whole Fire Nation army.
Yeah, they are ever growing known criminals by this point. So yeah, trying to remain clandestine seem important. So you call this a trilogy, but I know that we have a another graphic novel that's focused solely on Azula. Is this released around the same time, or did this come a bit later in these runs of graphic novels?
No, so yeah, we had this first trilogy about the um, women of Team Avatar. The Azula one came out significantly after.
Okay.
It's the most recent one that has been released as of the release of this episode. And this one is continuing from where we last saw Azula in Smoke and Shadow, where she was still kind of deranged. She had, or at least misguided. She had created her own mini cult of followers, of people she had breaking out of prison. She was pretending to be a bunch of spirits, and she was trying to bring down Zuko's reign by making him appear ineffective.
I'd say deranged is a fair descriptor for someone trying to create a cult that kidnaps babies. It's still, I don't think that's on the fence anymore. It's, it's not in the wisest of minds.
Yeah, so we see Azula continuing her vendetta against Zuko, like trying to burn grain shipments and make things as hard for his people as possible with her cult, her band, and her band is increasingly less susceptible to her leadership because while they're grateful for her breaking them out, she's also threatening, ignores their concerns, makes decisions by fiat, and endangers all of them on a increasingly quixotic crusade,
Mm-hmm.
tilting at windmills, as it were. They know that everyone else in her group knows that she's not going to bring down uh, Zuko at this point, but Katara or Azula can't give up.
Mm-hmm. So, without giving too much away, because this is so recently released, does this give Azula a satisfactory conclusion to her arc, or does it take her to the next step of her story, as it were?
Gives a little hint that maybe Azula could take some steps in paths healing, but she has lots of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
The subtitle of this comic could be Azula in the Spirit Temple while actively resisting all attempts at character development. So, I mean, she's literally confronted by a spirit that specializes in showing people their darker natures and helping them overcome it. And she just will refuse to acknowledge anything. She's like, "It's not my fault." She externalizes it. It's all these other people's fault. All these other people's faults. It's not me. We learn some more tragic details about why her relationship was so fraught with her mother. She has flashbacks about it. We see that her upbringing as the favorite golden child of a, um, you know,
Despo.
yeah, a despot was just as damaging to her as it was to Zuko in the other way,
Hmm.
where perfection was expected at all times. So it's not healthy for her either. And we see that trauma, generational trauma, just affecting her. She is at least starting to admit that it's affecting her, but is still blaming her mother, blaming Zuko, blaming Iroh, blaming her father, uh, and blaming her cult for abandoning her rather than accepting any personal responsibility. So at the very end, she was means to take revenge on someone, and then decides, you know what? She does the whole, oh, they're not worth my time. I'll just go on. So you can see that as her needing to justify mercy to herself, but it's the barest sliver of potential character development. This is mostly confirming it's like, yeah, Azula's still having a hard time. Everybody,
Hmm.
I don't. She's never probably going to be a happy, productive member of society like Zuko wants, unless she does a lot more work and a lot more healing.
Yeah, and she is still actively out there in the universe. She's not in chains like Ozai. She poses an active threat to the characters until she is dealt with. Who knows if that will be the case once we get to this animated Last Airbender film that takes place when Team Avatar are in their 20s, but I'll be interested to see what becomes of her.
Yeah, so that takes us through the sort of mini comic series that proceeded um, in balance. But then I think we can shift gears now. So that is pretty much everything in the canon, in the graphic novel wise, for Avatar: The Last Airbender between this episode and our last. But there is an entire other series, The Legend of Korra, that has its own graphic novel accompaniment. Not to the same degree, but certainly with areas that have expanded upon those characters as
Mhm.
well. So in The Legend of Korra, there are two primary collections, Turf Wars and Ruins of the Empire, both of which are similar to the six main volumes in the Avatar Aang series, in that they continue directly on from the conclusion of season 4 of The Legend of Korra and feature our primary Team Avatar characters as their central protagonists.
I think Turf War was probably my favorite read amongst anything from the Avatar expanded universe, just in how it is able to pick up every character and progress them just another step. Like the this felt like the only graphic novel collection that was truly standalone and could work as its own animated feature or mini season of TV. Uh, just try to encapsulate it once Asami and Korra return from their spirit world vacation. They come back to Republic City and have to deal with political turmoil of the spirit realm existing in a very real city and people claiming their stake over the land. You have crime running rampant and a new leader in that realm trying to unify the different gangs into one cohesive force. And you also have just some of the best romantic relationship based writing around Korra and Asami's new relationship and how each member of their social circles kind of come to learn and accept that. So just very deft, mature storytelling in a graphic novel that just I don't know, just stands on its own without needing the others to progress the story any further.
I would echo Connor's comment about the mature depiction of the romantic relationship between Korra and Asami. One, this is like, yes, they're together. Yes, they are in a queer relationship. Yes, you should be supportive of it. And no, not everyone is. There are real world things to grapple with. So it is
Mhm.
intended to be a realistic depiction of their relationship, but also a very supportive and inclusive one. So there's nothing glossed over. There's nothing assumed. There are, Korra has to tell her father, like, hey, I'm with Asami now. And her father is not immediately 100% accepting,
Mhm.
um, both, wondering if this is a phase she's going through, or um, also wondering if she should be public with it. Like he himself, and this is very kind. We learned about the Water Tribe. We wouldn't say that Tonrock is bigoted himself, but he is very deeply tied into the structural bigotry of the Water Tribe, which is sort of like a don't ask, don't tell. It's like, yes, whatever, we don't care who you're in a relationship with, but outward appearances must be maintained. So if you're sort of outside the norm with your relationship, just keep it to yourself. Korra is not
Mhm.
having this. and she is ashamed that her father would ask her to hide her relationship with Asami. And so then she seeks counsel with uh,
Kaya, who's Avatar Aang and Korra's daughter, who really, in my opinion, has
not
had
Korra's daughter, Avatar
or
Aang, and Katara's daughter.
Aang and Katara's daughter, who
Technically Korra's past lives daughter, so
right. But in my opinion, Kaya hasn't really had any purpose in the series until now. Just offering her expertise and her experience as a queer woman herself living in this world. Because really, she did not have a very strong role other than showing that, yes, Aang had other children, and he may have preferred the Airbender to the other
I will
ones.
not stand for this Kaya erasure. She is the first one who realized that there was something wrong with Zahir,
Sure.
recognized who he was, and attacked him immediately. No hesitation. Zahir, 3.3 seconds later, icicles going for him, and he's like, well, I'm going to reveal my Airbender, and this has gone from an infiltration to a raid. So
yeah, she's part of some strong scenes there, but
and she also is a nice foil for Aang or for Tenzin, because Bumi is kind of a eccentric individual, we'll say. So Kaya provides a more grounded and realistic take in that she does not assume the responsibility that either Tenzin or Bumi did. She rejected either being in the army or being leader of the Air Nation. So she was sort of left without a place. A waterbender, eclipsed by her mother, and she even mentions that she deliberately sort of took that on, and that she even finds the fact that she was pigeonholed into this typical feminine role of supporting their mother after their father's death, where Tenzin was running the Air Nation Island in Republic City, and Bumi was part of the military. So of course it fell to Kaya to take care of Katara after she became a widow. And Kaya is somewhat resentful of this. Like, you two could have helped me, but you did not. So you, of course my sister can handle this. And she is very aware of the typical water tribe and even, worldwide gender roles that would put her in this position.
So, all that needless to say, I enjoyed her characterization in this book because it actually felt naturally contributing to the story. Yes, I mean, she's a fine character, just not one of my favorites. But in this moment, it was like, she's providing really sound, experienced advice to our main characters. I enjoyed that.
I appreciate that Korra continually reaches out to the older women in her life for advice about how to handle not only romantic matters but life matters. So she has a variety of very different role models in Lin, in Pema, and in Kaya, all of whom give her different advice, some of which is good and some of which is bad. Pema being very idealistic but also a family-oriented woman, and also a non-bender. And now Korra is dating a non-bender, and sort of Pema can help her understand the dynamic between, make sure there's not a power imbalance there, because Tenzin is the most powerful airbender that exists other than the Avatar. And so and is the patriarch of a clan, how do you manage that relationship? Kaya saying, okay, here is how people are going to react to your relationship. You have to be prepared for this. Right. And I am here to support you. And then Lin saying, I don't care who you're dating, but I have your back to the hilt at any time. I'm just going to snark at you all the time.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about it with you, but just know that I got a hand on your shoulder and my support.
And then even Su Yin, who, again, matriarch of another family, very much a family woman in the same way Pema is, but a little bit older, and she herself is the matriarch rather than, being wife to Tenzin like Pema is. Su Yin herself is leader of her city. So I think Turf Wars shows Korra having internalized all of this from these role models, both in her relationship and in how she decides to interact with the world. And where Aang struggled to involve himself politically sometimes, wondering if it was the right thing to do, Korra has no such hesitation. Right. She's like, I hesitated, and Kuvira established the Earth Empire. So no more sitting on the sidelines for me.
And so digging into that role of where the story takes us, the titular Turf Wars, we have I would say, a fairly interesting antagonist in his simplicity. So some of the villains in these books, I feel that the writers tend to throw too much at them in terms of personality. They are radical, and they also, or I should say, in some of the others, they will have maybe conflicting goals, or maybe they are just being too radical. Here we just have a simple um, uh, individual who doesn't bend, but he is rallying all of the bending gangs together. His name is Tokuga.
Yeah, so Tokuga is interesting. He's originally he's the new leader of the Triple Threat Triad and takes leadership because a dark spirit has merged with him.
Mhm.
The,
It's effective in how simple it is because he doesn't have any grand political ideals. He just wants to see the world burn.
and he wants to be the best gangster, and the spirit inside of him wants to kill people and destroy things. And so, together, they accomplish that goal by trying to unify all the other triads.
What I find interesting is that, yes, it is this antagonistic force, but it's really in how Korra has to defeat him rather than should this person be defeated. It's, I don't know, it's an interesting challenge in that way. Uh, she doesn't have the back or the support of people in Republic City as she's trying to defend it, which
Yeah,
kind of goes into play with President Raiko and his inability to act, just because he is kind of paralyzed in fear of making the wrong choice. So it so often comes out as him making no choice.
yeah. So we see the politics of Republic City also take sort of front and center here. The new democracy that's been established, sort of being stressed by a real crisis in the fact we were invaded by the Earth Empire. A permanent spirit portal has opened in our city.
Mm-hmm.
Gangs are running rampant. What do we do? And Lin probably could have seized power if she wanted it, but she didn't. So Raiko then remains in power. But his election is coming up, and he is very concerned. So he demonizes Korra. Yeah, so the character of President Raiko is engaged in this other subplot of Turf Wars where he's up for election, and his approval rating is pretty low because he capitulated to Kavira during the invasion, which later turned out to be unnecessary because, hey, Korra was there
Mm-hmm.
and stopped the eventual conquest of the city.
And now he has kind of like a Varric Jr. who is trying to run his promotional campaign and just causing Raiko to get mixed up in affairs that he's only getting himself involved in to look better. So he's helping Korra and Asami build homes for people who were unhomed during Kuvira's invasion. And he's only part of it for the political clout.
He doesn't care if it actually works, just
Yeah.
so long as he gets the nice photo op doing it. And then when he's faced with an election challenge, he starts to demonize Korra.
Mm-hmm.
So she's the one who caused all of these problems, which not a great idea to do that for the Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
It finds a receptive audience because Korra is open about, yes, I could have closed the spirit portal and didn't. So, not a great... To the people of Republic City, having prime real estate in their downtown taken up by a spirit portal with spirits able to freely pass in and out is challenging. Mm-hmm. So it does not leaves people susceptible to, people saying, maybe Korra didn't make the right choice, which is up to the reader to decide whether Korra in fact did.
Mm-hmm. And I think that out of all the times where Korra is pit against the public, this conclusion very carefully allows her to win, where she is able to, one, kind of change the heart of the man who owns the land around the spirit portal, and two, in overcoming Tokuga, is able to convince the landowner to relinquish his rights to the spirit portal, and therefore they're able to become kind of a sanctuary that the Airbenders are then gifted by the next, I would say, more benevolent political leader.
And then we are able to see also an election season happen in Republic City where Zhu Li runs against Raiko with Varric as her campaign manager, doing everything above board and illegally, despite sometimes indicating he would be totally open to doing this the non-legal way, but Zhu Li telling him, you are my husband now, you do things the legal way, and him 100% agreeing as long as she's in earshot.
But he does everything he can to make her look great in his docu-movers. Again, it's another development in this timeline that I'm quite fond of.
Yeah, so Varric takes full advantage of his media empire experience to help his wife get elected to the presidency, showing a peaceful transfer of power once Raiko loses the election and Zhu Li becomes president of Republic City. It's probably my favorite subplot, other than Korra and Asami figuring out how to actually be in a relationship with each other, and then how do we break it to Mako? We're now dating each other. And Mako takes like a champ.
Right. This was out of a series of Mako making maybe not the best emotional decisions is relatively cool with his two exes now dating one another.
And I will say, uh, Mako was 100% in the wrong with his two times being in a relationship with Asami.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in his relationship with Korra, they were both hella toxic to each other. So that relationship ending was good for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship with Asami, he then tried again and failed. So I am glad that Mako is staying single and working on himself and focused on his relationship with his brother and his job because Mako needs some time. His tendency towards codependence in a relationship due to his upbringing is very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So Korra and Asami are much better for each other than Mako and Asami or Mako and Korra ever were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mako recognizes that. He's also very happy for both of them. Somewhat bemused when it happens. He's like,
I need to process this.
you're not just good friends, but you are together, dating each other. Let me process this.
My exes.
All right.
Yeah.
I have now processed it. I am supportive. I am still confused, but you are both of my best friends, and I will be there for you.
Mm-hmm.
So big points to Mako for being an ally and for, and I think this is also echoing, it's sometimes, and Connor, you maybe know more about this than me, the queer community can be small. And so things like your ex dating your ex might happen. And so directly engaging with that in a story in a mature way was also, I think, a sign of good maturity in the story writing here in Turf Wars.
Yeah, I appreciate how, like, one, everyone's ultimately on board, but two, they aren't immediately, like, at face value on board. So even Korra's dad is supportive, but he's supportive with a large asterisk and warning. And that doesn't become, softer until he reconciles with Korra and says, I grew up in a pretty strict time and part of the world too. So it's just very believable. And I badmouthed how Aang and Katara were depicted, and it was just kind of cutesy. Calling each other sweetie, and it's like it's very superficial, and it doesn't deal so much with how two people who are in this mixed friend group now have taken their relationship to the next level, whereas this does in a strong way. I mean, the whole entire book is devoted to this development happening and everyone kind of coming to terms with it. So
yeah, and they each have to actually grapple with different priorities. Okay, now because we're dating doesn't mean we agree on everything. While also being adorable, the relationship is not depicted as like cutesy or just for, aren't they both adorable? Like they have real challenges to overcome. Like Asami is still the CEO of a very large company at too young of an age. Her father is still dead. Republic City is still in shambles. So they took a nice break from that, but when they return, they still have all of this stuff to grapple with. And neither of them are used to being able to work on that as a team. Korra feels very isolated as the Avatar and is still overcoming the trauma from her year spent alone. And Asami has to admit that, yes, she might actually need some support because she is now an orphan and she had a breakup and her company almost had a hostile takeover and half of her home city was destroyed. So yes, you can lean on Korra a little bit. She has seen difficult things too. So I appreciated that they had to learn to do that. It wasn't just like, their relationship is 100% perfect right away, which would have felt unrealistic.
And coming back to the point where Korra kind of wins the day. It usually feels like there's some sort of caveat where, yes, she saved the day, but there's a new spirit portal that she has to contend with. Or, yes, the day is saved, but now she is kind of paralyzed and needs to heal and recover. Here, she, gains acceptance and the comfort in her relationship. She's able to overcome Takuga, who is still out there in the spirit world, taking part in who knows what kind of mischievous Machiavellian plans. But you also have the spirits who are happier with Korra, because she has helped to develop the city in order to be more accepting and loving towards the spirits. And now with the air nomads moving in to be sort of defenders of the sacred portal, there's just a feeling of hope. Republic City is not in shambles anymore. Korra and Team Avatar are pretty unified. It would be a natural, great place to finish while they were ahead, but they made more.
Yeah, so before we get into the next volume, I know we talked about in the Avatar comics, the most important one story-wise was The Search, but the best written one was Imbalance. So I would say Turf Wars for Korra is currently filling both slots.
Mhm.
It is the most important story-wise, showing the recovery of Republic City after Kuvira's attack, and the most important and best-written character-wise, showing how everyone works together and resolves their new places in the world.
Mhm.
So then there's a second major volume in the Korra canon called Ruins of the Empire.
It kind of acts as the search because where the search took Azula and pit her with Team Avatar, having to look for her and Zuko's mother, we have a Kuvira redemption arc where I would say, I'm just going to say Kuvira didn't really move. She was already remorseful. She was already, even if she wasn't taking the full blame, she was still kind of understood her actions, and by the end, just takes the blame a little bit more. But there's not as great of a development in that. And also, they sideline half of the team with brainwashing, which feels very lazy. But I'm getting ahead of myself as far as the story goes.
Yeah. So this one is a little bit like things like North and South and Smoke and Shadow, where it's plot, 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 breathlessly. So Korra and Kuvira. Kuvira is in prison. Obviously, was a fascist dictator trying to invade a peaceful city. She surrenders. King Wu, Prince Wu, is supposed to become King Wu and take over the Earth Kingdom. However, Kuvira built a whole apparatus about the Earth Empire, which isn't about to go away. Which was good to see that kind of world building. You know, just because you decapitate the leader or take out the leadership of an organization does not mean that all of the grassroots support vanishes. You know, it certainly doesn't help. Sometimes things just melt away, but with the structures and that Kuvira put in place, one of her seconds in command, one of her lieutenants, refuses to give up and continues the effort to reclaim the Earth Kingdom using concentration camps, brainwashing, guerrilla tactics, political assassination, all of Kuvira's favorite tools as well.
And I was initially like, okay, this is a compelling enough villain. His name is Guan, and he is just amassing the military that was in shambles after the Earth Queen was, I was going to say decapitated, but suffocated.
So, yeah, and one thing that Connor and I have talked about previously that we like is that, and we wish that this had grappled with more, is that the Earth Queen was a terrible ruler.
Mhm.
All the problems that were happening in her realm that she wanted Korra to help with were real, caused by her incompetence and her bad management. All of the problems that Kuvira recognized and fixed as the Great Uniter actually existed. So the fact that it left a power vacuum that she was able to then establish her own fascist regime, not great that she did the fascist regime part, but the fact that there were actual structural problems in the Earth Kingdom to fix left in the power vacuum after the Earth Queen died, liked that it grappled with that. Ruins of the Empire, I think, also shows that just because Kuvira was removed, she was a more effective ruler than the Earth Queen, internally at least. And so her departure has left people hungry for additional governance and guidance, which Guan takes ruthless advantage of.
And it would be interesting if they left it at, okay, the Earth Kingdom is now opening public democratic elections. Guan has entered himself in to become a candidate up for the running of one of these positions. And it would have been great to see just like, okay, let the people choose. Are they going to choose the old ways where there wasn't any progression or as much care for the people, or are they going to try something new and radical? We don't get to see that because Guan's just brainwashing everyone.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see Guan actually win legitimately because people appreciated the stability that he brought as local governor. But instead, no, it turns out Guan's brainwashing everyone to vote for him, which sort of undercuts the whole message and makes him a Saturday morning cartoon villain instead of a compelling survivor of a fallen empire.
It's like the North and South villain, the Southern Water chieftain, who wanted to maintain traditions and keep themselves separated from the North, but he was willing to do that through radical, murderous ways. So, how, as we as an audience, how are we supposed to see the villain side? The most compelling villain is one who you can almost agree with. Brainwashing is not one that many morally centered people are going to agree with. So it just makes for all right, hand waving, when are we going to topple this next dictator?
Yeah, so in Kuvira was one of those people where you did not agree with her actions, but you understood them.
Mm-hmm.
You understood why she thought she needed to do what she did. understood how the trajectory of her life led her to believe that she was the only person who could fix this problem, and led her to believe that the ends justified the means, and the means justified the ends. We understood that for Kuvira. Guan is just sort of a little bit of a cardboard cutout. So the most interesting part of Ruins of the Empire, the seeing, and much like the scene with Korra having to go to see Zahir in prison to get advice for dealing with Kuvira, Korra has to team up with Kuvira to bring down Kuvira's lieutenant because they are two of the only people who escape being brainwashed by Guan.
So, yeah, taking a look at what this story is trying to do, like all of the Avatar graphic novels, it's dealing with these great large concepts of, okay, so how do we move this large political state forward that has had such history and culture? You can't just rush into it. How do you slowly allow people to grow and develop to this point? At the same time, we're battling old regimes, and we really only have two main characters to focus on here in Kuvira and Korra, because the rest of Team Avatar has been brainwashed. And like Bolin, as much as Bolin is a laughy, jokey character, has some of the most emotional development throughout the series. So to see him relegated to just silent assassin was a little disappointing.
Well, yeah, Bolin on the run with Varric, having to acknowledge his role in being duped into a fascist regime, was peak Bolin.
Mm-hmm.
And then using his lava bending to help fight against Kuvira, and having to then seek the forgiveness of his girlfriend, who he thought he was making the self-sacrificing choice and was actually propping up Kuvira. Loved that Bolin. And then Bolin, it's like he didn't end up any worse at the end of Ruins of the Empire, but they didn't take him anywhere better. And then
Right.
the emotional core here is not really Korra. Korra is there as a foil for Kuvira mostly, and we start to deal with the big questions that Avatar always does: redemption and forgiveness, and where does that lie, and who can be redeemed and when. And Su Yin is primarily the person who Kuvira needs to seek forgiveness from, and there's sort of this, I don't know, proto-Freudian where Su Yin was her sort of surrogate mother figure, and Kuvira turned on her after being her student. So in the end, Kuvira, due to her help bringing down Guan, is allowed to be under house arrest in Zaofu rather than in maximum security in Republic City or the Earth Kingdom. Mm-hmm. Whether she deserves that chance at redemption, I'm not sure the story lets her earn it, or sort of hand waves away some of the actual atrocities she committed. Like, there was a person who originally sought out this brainwashing in concentration camps and all that, and that was Kuvira. So I think the story is a little bit eager to give her a pass. I think there is an attempt to show that she was a product of her time and her upbringing, but no, it's still not quite enough to excuse the choices that she made. And I think some people see her getting off as a little easy, or the author even thinking that Kuvira had a point. And as I said, I acknowledge that Kuvira was fixing real problems, but it was her choice to set up a fascist dictatorship. So,
and I think if we compare Kuvira with a character like Zahir, Kuvira isn't, like, the character of Kuvira isn't interesting because of her personality. She doesn't really have a strong personality. She serves as the culmination of generations of development and the lack thereof in the Earth Kingdom. So it's kind of like she is this byproduct of politics and war and stagnation.
I think that's even the point of Kuvira, in that she has a cult of personality, but she herself molds herself to fit whatever she thinks. Mm-hmm. She is more of a person of principles than charisma.
So to give her her own graphic novel dealing with her redemption, I feel is not as necessary as trying to deal with Azula. And
because we understood the reasons that Kuvira was making her choices. Mm-hmm. We understood that she regretted them. We didn't really need to see her, like, should she deserve to be forgiven or not? Well, you could say that about Hiroshi Sato as well. It's not really up to, forgiveness is something someone earns from themselves, and whether other people around them forgive them is not up to them. I don't think Republic City is going to forgive Kuvira anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Su Yin having the political pull to get Kuvira remanded to her custody is entirely realistic. She could have thrown her hat in the ring for being elected or even become leader of the Earth Kingdom if she had wanted it, and she didn't. So, in the end, I wish we'd had more development there. Mm-hmm. I do like Kuvira as a character. I think some people see her as a flatter villain compared to Zahir, but I think where Zahir was a person acting out of his own
Mhm.
agency to all else. Kuvira grows, as you said, out of the structural problems and is almost a symptom of the mismanagement of the Earth Kingdom for hundreds of years.
Yeah, she's symbolic of the Earth Kingdom. She is the end result of what has occurred to it, and so that is the true villain of Korra season 4. It is the Earth Kingdom, and is not solely Kuvira. It's what the Earth Kingdom has led Kuvira to do.
Yeah, it's a
So,
cycle of abuse, but on the nation level,
mhm,
where the Fire Nation was a conqueror, and now the Earth Kingdom is the conqueror, and so
mhm.
we just see the colonization of the Earth Kingdom is one of the reasons that Kuvira looks to fight back against Republic City and reclaim it as ancestral
Mhm.
land. So it's all going back to Sozan's original decision to invade the Earth Kingdom, yeah, which happened at this point like 200 years ago.
So I suppose if we take a look at this is our final chronological piece of the story of Avatar. So taking a look at imbalance, we see that it's shaping up to Republic City. I wonder where Ruins of the Empire is going to lead up to the sequel series, the series that takes place after Korra, surrounding an Earth-based Avatar. So it's going to be a full democracy. It may be like Republic City at large. So seeing how that will shape the new Avatar will certainly be interesting. Uh, Multiple regions, states, all taking and influencing a person rather than just the whole entire kingdom of Earth.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm interested to see if they release more Korra media beyond some small standalones that are more character sketches than anything else. So I'm eager to see more stuff set in the world of Avatar,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the time of Republic City and Avatar Korra. But yeah, currently that is the furthest chronological significant amount of story that we have seen in the Avatar universe. We do not know what happens afterwards.
And as much as I love Aang and his team, his story feels done. Uh, the graphic novels that came after the series ended, they were helpful in showing the progression and the connective tissue to Korra, but his drama feels complete. Aang's Korra, it feels like Turf Wars put a cap on it. Like it actually progressed and concluded things. So uh, there's still work that could be done in that world just to see how spirits, benders and non-benders, all ally and align themselves in the future.
Yeah, in the world of Korra, I want to see what happens with the spirits in a
Mm-hmm.
serious way. I want to see what happens with Mako, and now that Prince Wu is no longer in his care, does he go back to the police force, and how does he grow as a character?
Mm-hmm.
Do Bolin and Opal, do they work out their differences? What happens with the Earth Kingdom politically? Uh, what happens with the water tribes, which are still fraught with tension? Does does Tenzin come up with a succession plan and appoint other people so he can't keep just managing everything himself?
Mm-hmm.
Does Boomy take on a role in managing and shepherding the growing Earth Nation? I want to know all the answers to all of those.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine some of them myself, but I think there is ripe area for expanding in the world of Korra, and whether that's through a novel, a graphic novel, a new series, whatever you'd like to do, I am here for it.
Yeah, just some more connective tissue between Korra, and whenever we get to a future story where spirit portals are a means of massive transportation and shipping and receiving goods and internet Wi-Fi connections and all sorts of other shenanigans that we've been digging into with potentials for what's coming up. But it'll take some time to get there. We have a live action series and an animated film to uh, grace our screens first. And yes, so we want to thank you for joining us on this sojourn into the world of Avatar, and I think we'll be returning again, especially as more content is created. But stay tuned next time, audience members, for us to return to Talking Star Wars.
Yeah, this concludes our look at the graphic novels currently released and the time of release of this episode in early 2024. We will resume our regularly scheduled look at the world of Star Wars, the characters, plots, and items there. But we might dive back in and dip our toes back into the Avatar universe whenever we feel like Star Wars needs a bit of a break.
especially when we discuss the movie that does not exist in Ba Sing Se.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.